Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of Stakeholders Podcast. I'm Neil Sioned, CEO of the National Beef Association, and I'm joined by most, if not all, of our normal crew. Sioned has returned from her holiday, which turned out to be 1 week and not 8 months. Ben is here, and he's had an incident of extreme concern on his farm today, being a fire. And we're joined by Guillaume, who's going to introduce himself right now. Guillaume, tell us who you are and your background,
Thank you,
please.
Neil. So I'm Guillaume Convert. I'm a vet. I graduated something like 30 years ago. I work today for Boehringer Ingleheim as a technical manager for ruminants, and I've been involved for, I would say, something like 5 years in all the topic of bluetongue and I would say midges transmitted diseases, and also FMD because all these diseases are in our scope today.
Great, thank you. And we'll come back to Guillaume at the end. So, everyone, you'll know, and I'll just remind you that we bring these podcasts to everyone with the help of Boehringer Ingelheim. And, this podcast, this episode is purely about bluetongue and the escalating situation we're seeing in the south of the country in particular. So we're going to try and put to bed some of the myths and misunderstandings that are out there currently with the disease. So I'm going to start, and Ben, Sean, and Guillaume, challenge me at any time if you think this is incorrect or not.
Okay.
But it's certainly to the best of my knowledge. So the strain that has been picked up so far in the southwest, let's say North Devon, but it's growing, and that area is expanding, is BTV3, which was commonly seen in the Netherlands and Belgium and other bits of Europe in the back end of 2023 onwards. And the first cases in England were seen in 2023. And we've had cases every year since then. So let's be clear, this is not a new disease, it's not a new strain. It's been circulating in GB, or in England in particular, since November, December 2023. What we're probably seeing now is what happens when you get the disease in a very dense livestock area. And that's probably why we're getting so many cases. We didn't experience that perhaps when we had the disease in the eastern counties, but we are seeing that now. And it's probably magnified by, whilst we had a sort of dry summer last year, this year it's been dry, but it's been very, very hot as well. And that will add stress to livestock, in particular sheep. So hopefully that's one myth busted already. We hear about the challenge on people waiting for test results. So I'm going to try and explain as best as I can how that happens. When a case of bluetongue is identified, so bluetongue is a reportable disease, when it's identified either by the farmer or the vet, and it's reported to APHA, either by the farmer or the vet, that is added to a rolling list of what they call report cases. And once that report has been logged, it is then up to APHA to send or organise the private vet in England to go and collect some samples from the farm. Now, 3 samples can be collected and processed free of charge, but your own private vet in England needs to pay for that. In Wales, Welsh Government are supporting the vet visit as well. Now, it's not up to us to debate what's right or what's wrong. The most important thing is that there's 3 free tests to be done here to identify bluetongue on farm. And, if the vet phones APHA, it's likely that the vet will get called back with the what they call the ERZ number. And that number is critical to get the sampling done. And all information on there, holding number, animal ID needs to be correct. Anything missing, the sample will not be processed till the end. If it's a positive sample, whichever animal that sample is linked to will not be identified. And so they can't give you the feedback. Information front end is really, really important. So that's an ERZ in England, and it's a WRZ in Wales. So Ben, that's probably the first time you've heard that. I'm going to use you as my bounce back. Does all that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. But you're right. I've not heard of the ERZ or the WRZ before.
No. So it's just there's numbers that follow the codes to give a reference to make sure the samples are processed free of charge. Now, I've got permission from DEFRA to quote these figures. At the end of play on Thursday last week, there were 590 report cases in the system. So that's report cases. So many of these might have just been the first phone call, no samples collected. And so far, I think we're reporting 84 positive cases. This is the next key point. A positive case is not an animal, it's a farm. There could be one or there could be 1,000. It's a farm. So let's not just get confused with this, that there has been 84 animals impacted. The number is far higher than that. A positive case is linked to the holding. Now, these 590 aforementioned report cases, some of those will be negated, but the rolling rate of positive cases at the moment is 73%. So 73% of 590 is for 400 and something. So as of Thursday last week, it's likely that we had 4 times as many, maybe 5 times as many cases as what's currently reported. We can't help the lag. I understand people are getting frustrated about the time lag. We can't help it. It's a notifiable disease, so there's a report case in the system as soon as the phone call is made. And then it takes time for the vet to go out and take samples, for the samples to then be posted. And we've had cases where the samples have taken, upwards of 7 days to reach the lab. So that holds the process up. And all the identification numbers need to be correct. Ben, I'm going to stress test that one in you as well.
Yeah. Oh, it makes perfect sense. Well done.
Good.
Keep on.
Good. Right. So we're going to move on to some other questions. Sioned, can we vaccinate pregnant animals?
Yeah, so as we've discussed before, we've got a huge database of information around the use of this vaccine. We've sold approaching 50 million doses of the Boehringer vaccine across Europe by now, and we know that the vaccine is safe for use in different classes of animals. We've monitored the pharmacovigilance data safely. I think what farmers, what producers, sheep and cattle have to bear in mind at the moment is that we do seem to have seen this big shift in the risk that infection is posing to animals. And whilst I can understand concerns around any intervention, particularly when animals are pregnant, I think we're in a situation where bluetongue infection is posing a far, far, far greater risk to livestock currently than any possible risk associated with handling the vaccine itself. We know has a robust safety profile. So I would suggest that anybody, particularly those in the south of the UK, but also further afield, have that conversation with their vets, and if they haven't vaccinated already, really do consider it, because I think we're at an unprecedented kind of point with this infection in the UK at the moment, where suddenly we've turned that corner. And you'll be like me, you've been on social media. I was at the NSA sheep event earlier this week. The stories out there are pretty chilling, really. And I think, if you haven't vaccinated already, then now is the time to consider doing it, to try to mitigate that risk as much as you can.
Great.
So can I come in with a follow-up on that then, Sharon? For those people who are in that area or in any other area, is it worth vaccinating once you know you have an outbreak, or is that just shutting the door after the horse has bolted?
Yeah, it's a nuanced kind of decision. I think it's one to be made with the farm's own vet, but because bluetongue isn't transmitted from animal to animal, because it's transmitted by a midge, I think there's still value in vaccinating healthy animals. Obviously, when animals that have shown clinical signs, the horse is long gone. But if it were me, I would still vaccinate those healthy animals on my farm, because there's quite variable data in Europe on exposure within herds as well. So you can have groups of animals where only a proportion of them have actually been infected, and the rest will remain susceptible and could become infected later in the season as well. So yeah, I think it definitely is, and yeah, that's what I would be doing if I were in that boat.
Okay, good answer. And just a bit of personal experience on it. So this year, when I did my vaccinations, I actually had a sync, and I AI'd cattle between jabs 1 and 2. And I'm going to say, from my experience, no downside. And I know there was fears at the time that I wasn't doing the right thing and worrying about whether it was going to affect fertility. I can't say whether it definitely did or didn't, but the effects are most of my cows got into the AI, so it didn't seem to have any negative effects on me. So that's just a personal thing, eh?
Yeah, there is one point which is super important to precise. Huh? We are at the very, very beginning of the wave. The peak of the wave will be September and October. The moment where you will have the maximum of infected animals will be September, October. You are at the very beginning, and it seems that the wave starts strong. So I really, it's really time to vaccinate. It's really time to vaccinate for those who didn't yet, because it really looks that the wave will be strong.
And I think, Guillaume, that's when we had the modelling done, DEFRA had I think Nottingham University did some modelling on worst case scenario back in 2020. We've been dealing with this so long now. I think that was 24, and we're in the point where we're seeing the worst case scenario was serious disease outbreak in May. These test results have a lag, so probably some of this was at June, mid-June, towards the end of June. So we are close to potentially what the worst case scenario was, and the worst case scenario wasn't good. Absolutely. Shored, more vaccine questions. So if I'm not currently in an area where there is an outbreak, I guess my advice would be, and I'm asking you, would be just to vaccinate anyway. Because this will probably move up and across the country. And secondly, in both species, how long does it take for the vaccine to be, or how long does it take to build up immunity?
Yeah, so I totally agree, Neil. I think if you're a farmer in an area where there isn't currently active infection, then now is the time to act. I think the industry's been very circumspect. I think we maybe hoped that there was something different about the way the virus was interacting with UK livestock that meant we wouldn't see such severe clinical signs in sheep in particular as had been observed on the continent. But I think it's rapidly looking like that's not the case. So if you're in an area where there isn't yet active infection, now is the time to vaccinate so that protection is there ahead of what is, a fairly high likelihood that this will continue to spread as the season goes on. If you are in a region where there is active infection, I think it's still, we can't go back in time. It's still the best thing to do is to vaccinate now and hope that there is immunity in place before your stock encounter the infection. It takes 3 weeks post completion of a primary course for animals to be fully protected. The sooner you begin, the sooner that immunity will begin to rise and those animals will be resilient to the signs of disease. So yeah, I think, act now is the message, really.
And 3 weeks.
And extrapolating, sorry, from those there, if I can. So if Guillaume rightly says this is the beginning of the wave and the DEFRA research worst case scenario research would point in that direction.
And
There are already cases, I'm looking at the map, from Preston in the north to Truro in the south. And all of the line sort of west of Derby to Salisbury. So the area is actually quite big already. I beg your pardon, Guillaume.
Yeah, there is one point I wanted to mention. It follows a discussion I had 2 years ago with Giovanni Savini from Italy, who has been working on BTV for years. And we were a little bit surprised because 2 years ago and last year, we saw with the same virus, the same serotype 3, with, I would say, the same strain, in the Netherlands and continental Europe and in the UK, we saw a very different clinical incidence. Very severe disease in continental Europe, and I mean something really mild in the UK. It was the same strain. No variation, no difference. And Giovanni told me he observed during the last 20 years that in a place, the more you have a big number of sick animals, those animals become extremely sick. If you have just a few animals that display clinical signs, you will have animals with moderate clinical signs. But if you have a lot of animals that are sick, you are very likely to see them very sick. And probably this is a little bit the picture you are entering into in the UK. Till now, the outbreak, I mean, was moderate. There was not a big density of sick animals. So the clinical signs you have witnessed were not that impressive. But you have to be very careful. Probably, if there is a multiplication of the number of sick animals, you will see also an amplification of the severity of the disease, of the BTV3 infection.
That's fascinating. So, what is it a suggestion then that because there are a lot of sick animals, there is a bigger viral load because more midges are biting the animals? Animals may be bitten more times, and that's why the disease is getting worse. Is that what's going on, or am I just guessing? Well, I'm just guessing.
Uh, What happens, in fact, you have to consider that cattle are virus factories. When a cow is infected, it starts to multiply the virus, it becomes viremic with a very high level of viremia. And this viremia lasts something like almost 2 months. And it's a big difference with sheep. Sheep, they have low viremia during 2 weeks only. So cattle are really the reservoir and the multiplicator for the virus. So when you have a lot of cattle that are infected, you are very likely to have midges that will contaminate. At their turn, these midges with the high temperature and so on will have what we call extrinsic incubation period. I mean, the time the virus migrates to the midgut, to the salivary gland, which is reduced. So very quickly, midges become contaminants. On top of that, they're able to multiply the virus, so you have an amplification of the virus in the midges. So you have the cocktail for, I would say, massive transmission to animals. And when they are infected with, I would say, massive loads of virus, they are more likely to display more severe clinical signs. Even if we say, usually, just a single bite can trigger the disease. But obviously, if you have a massive load of virus which is, I would say, transmitted at once to an animal, he is very likely to be massively, I would say.
I think so. I think this is really important for listeners to understand. So when England had its RZ, it started by memory. Sure, you might help me here, just above East Riding, and it went across the top of basically Lancashire. It came all the way down, bits of Hampshire, Buckinghamshire, basically the whole east of the country. It was something like 60% of England's land area. But it was the key here is it was less than 13% of livestock. And now we've flipped that. So think of that on the other side. We've got 32 or thereabouts percent of the land area with 80+% of the livestock.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is why we're seeing such multiplication of the disease. And this, to be fair, was one of the concerns, going back to the very beginning, what might happen if this disease at a high rate gets into livestock dense areas. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing. Yeah.
And it's fair to say, is it that the sheep are a bellwether here? So what we're seeing in the sheep, because the sheep are going down sick or dying, what we're not really seeing that in the cattle yet, but it's a bellwether for what's going to happen come calving season or come scanning season.
So
if anyone, Neil?
Yeah, just a little bit. So we are seeing more clinical signs in cattle in North Devon and that area than what we saw in the eastern side of the country. Now, what we saw in the east, or what I kept referencing on the eastern counties, etc., was that the disease was silent and invisible because it was the reproductive part of the animal that was impacted, and you couldn't see that. We're seeing stronger clinical signs in cattle this time. So if we're seeing it on the outside, I'm saying you can be pretty sure it's doing a lot of damage on the inside. And that was the next question, shown it to Guillaume as well. My sheep have got, my sheep are ill, but my cattle look okay. What's the risk?
So maybe I can answer. On sheep, I mean, it's spectacular when you have a sheep which is infected. The clinical signs are clear, and animals are very sick with this serotype 3. And I would say you will see mortality, impressive mortality on sheep when they are sick. In the case of cattle, mortality is not that high. Huh? You have mortality which is something like 1 to 2%. You have a drop in milk production, but I mean, these clinical signs don't last a long time. Within a couple of weeks, the animal will be better. What we have witnessed in continental Europe for cattle, it is that farmers figured out they had BTV3 not during the vector season, but next spring. So very likely the consequences of cattle infections will be extremely visible from next spring, when you expect to see the calving season, and you will see some calves missing. To the estimates we had in France, for example, last year, they were missing something like 200,000 calves. It changed completely the market of beef meat. The price rise dramatically because there is a lack of animals. And you have to understand that this virus, the way this virus, I would say, damages the animals is quite simple. The virus damages the vascular system. And it targets very well the vascular system of the genital tract. So for the males, you have some I would say some small damages on the testicular area. You have some consequences with the spermatogenesis, and you have a decrease in the quality of the semen. You have this kind of thing. But on the females, you have also the same thing. You have an incidence on the ovaries. So you have a decrease in the number of ovocytes that are produced. So even during the very early steps, preliminary to the pregnancy, you have already an incidence with less cells produced for reproduction. After that, regarding the uterus, you have some damages in the matrix. So the nidification of the ovocyte is compromised. So you have many times some ovocytes they don't nidificate, and after that you have an animal that will be back in heat period. After that, you will have also damages for the placenta. So you have resorptions of the embryo. Even if you have nidification, you have resorption of the embryo. And later on, regarding, I would say, the oxygenation of the fetus, you will have some damages and some consequence with a bad oxygenation of the fetus that will lead to abortions. And even during the later stages, you will have malformations. And we have seen in continental Europe a lot of calves that were born almost viable, I would say, but with hydroencephaly, or what we call the dumb calf, because I would say the formation of the brain was not optimal. So you have consequences at any step of the pregnancy. Whenever the infection comes on a pregnant animal, you may have some consequences.
And I think
abortion is visible, but early stages, you will have an increase of the calving interval, and at the end, it costs a fortune to the farmers. This kind of
and Guillaume, so we've seen that, and we've seen that to a degree in the eastern counties. So a third of calf production missing. You know, early abortions, very late abortions of dead calves, and then dummy calves, stargazing calves that just stood and stared straight up in the sky. Neurological challenge, you know, partial brain, no brain. So I think you have very well answered the question. You know, I see it in my sheep, but I don't see anything in my cattle. So, and again, we can't stress enough, I think, the need to continue to just speak to your private vet about vaccination and look at that as the only solution. I'm going to go back, Sioned. You know, some people are asking, do we use garlic licks, fly sprays, Purons? Is there any deterrent for this midgie or not?
Yeah, so I think Scops and Cows have released a statement today about that, discouraging people from using those kind of chemicals unnecessarily because they may play some role in fly control, but in reality, it takes one bite from a Culicoides midge to transmit blue tongue. So using them more than you would normally use them during the fly season is not likely to have any impact on the transmission of the virus. And actually, we all know there's downsides to overusing those kind of chemicals as well.
Yeah.
So really, vaccination is the evidence kind of based, proven way of protecting your livestock. There are some other things that can help, but there's nothing else that has that robust kind of evidence supporting it ultimately.
No, and we were one of those organisations that lobbied government, who, to be fair, were very supportive in getting the vaccine, so Boehringer vaccine, and available to use under firstly an emergency market authorisation, etc. Are we close to getting a full market authorisation for the vaccine?
Yeah, we're kind of on that journey. So it takes time to gather all of the evidence that you need to support a full registration for a vaccine. We're working with the regulatory authorities to do that as quickly and as efficiently as we can. We're still in the process of trying to get that duration of immunity data added to the provisional marketing authorization as well. But it will take some more time. But I think farmers, users shouldn't be concerned that reflects any lack of knowledge around how the vaccine performs, because like I said before, we've used it so widely now. We know its safety profile and we know its efficacy profile as well. So it's not because there's gaps in the kind of fundamental data supporting its use.
Right, I've got a question then, because I don't understand this, and I really should, I'm sure. But what is the functional difference as far as me, a farmer, or me, my vet, is concerned between the emergency market authorization and the full? Also, what's happening there? Is that creating a blockage somewhere?
No, so the emergency authorization was what we had right at the start, Ben, when there was a disease emergency identified, and so the use of the vaccine was permitted, even though there was really quite basic data at the time supporting its use. We then moved to the provisional marketing authorization, which is kind of akin to a full marketing authorization, but acknowledges that there are pieces of data that you would need to support a full marketing authorization that can't be generated in that timeline when there's a disease outbreak taking place. And we're sort of on that journey at the moment, approaching the point where we will have that additional data in time to support a full marketing authorization. So it's a process that's in place to allow vaccines to be brought to market rapidly when these kind of things occur effectively.
But it's not slowing down the bringing vaccine into the country or from
Not at
wherever
all.
your labs are or anything like that. Okay, that's good to
No,
know.
not at all. Not at all. And I think, we, like I've said a couple of times already, we know this vaccine well now, and we can advise well on how it performs, how it can be best used, and we understand its safety profile really well as well. I mean, I think I've probably said this before because it's one of my favourite facts. To put this into context, I think we've sold more Boehringer vaccine in the last few years in Europe than we have Boehringer vaccine ever since its launch. So, it's been used widely, it's been tested, and we've monitored how it's performed in field as well. So it's a really well characterised vaccine. It's just been needed by the market quickly, and we've used the processes that are in place to facilitate that.
And in case anyone didn't know, Bovilla is the single shot BVD vaccine that has been widely used for a long time. So yeah, and Shona, just cover this up again. Vaccination in sheep, one jab, target 21 days later they'll have best immunity. Cattle, two jabs, 21 days apart, best immunity comes after 42 days. Would that be a fair quote?
After 3 weeks. Yeah. So 3 weeks after that 3 weeks after completion of the primary dose for both species, is a 1-dose primary course for sheep and a 2-dose primary course for cattle.
Yeah. So I did my cattle in July last year. So what do I do now? What do I need to do this year?
Yeah, so we don't have the duration of immunity on the SPC yet, but we're confident based on our knowledge of BTV immunity and knowledge of how other bluetongue vaccines perform, that boosting with administering a single dose will give you a secondary immune response. So you'll have a rapid increase in immunity post a single dose.
And long-lasting also.
Yeah.
We can't the duration of immunity studies were completed. We can't communicate yet on them because it's still on the registration process. But I would say this is very classical duration of immunity. The data that were found are very classical with so there is no bad surprise regarding the efficacy we can expect from this kind of vaccine.
Yeah.
And I think that's the message for people who did vaccinate last year, is that if you administer another vaccine now, that immunity will be developed really, really rapidly. So you've already primed those animals' immune system. They'll be very rapidly reactivated again.
Yeah. So Guillaume, what's happening in France then? So why is the situation in France quite quiet now compared to what we are seeing here?
In France we had outbreaks. It started in the eastern part of France, and last year we had very severe BTV3 outbreaks in Normandy and Brittany. Well, I think that now in France the disease has been circulating for 2 years. Globally, you have to keep in mind that midges transmission don't reach all animals during one season. Globally, you have 1/3 of the susceptible animals that are contaminated by midges during one vector season. I would say in sheep it is 30%, in cattle it is 40%. So when the disease has circulated, I would say quite severely during 2 years, after that, I would say the incidence collapses. So in France, we had the circulation of the disease during 2 years. We had quite a lot of animals that were vaccinated, so it completes, I would say, the herd immunity. And when you have globally 80% of the animals that were in contact with the virus, either by the vaccine, either by natural infection, I would say the population is immune. The immunity against BTV is a long-lasting immunity. So generally, they are protected during a few years after such events. So I don't think that this year we will see a big incidence of BTV3 in France. Last year there were no cases in the Netherlands, there were no cases in Germany, because in fact they reached earlier than UK the herd immunity. But globally, in the profile of BTV outbreaks, you need to complete, I would say, 80% herd immunity, and after that, the outbreaks, I would say, collapse. Animals are protected, and they used to lose their immunity within something like 5 years. So in continental Europe, I would not be surprised to see BTV3 significantly coming back from 2030 to 2031. In the UK, you will have some kind of delay in this scheme probably, but I see there is this kind of gap, time gap between continental Europe and UK, but the profile of the outbreak is likely to be very similar.
And it's quite scary that from 2023 to now, we're almost 3 years in, and if it's a 5-year cycle, we'll still be working on the first round of this when it could be coming back again. And that says to me that people should be looking at vaccinating for BTV3, as part of their ongoing vaccination plan for quite a number of years. Sioned, on that, one of our other questions is there anything else that I can do to protect my animals? We've already ruled out, any high risk, pour-ons or dip-in strategies? Is there anything, or is this just one of those things we've got to deal with it, and the best thing we can do is vaccinate?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the discussion around kind of other things that could be done to protect against BTV actually originated in the Netherlands before there was an effective vaccine. So there was discussion around housing animals during the risk period. There's been discussion around high-speed fans as well. So we know that if you have high wind speeds, high air speeds, the Culicoides midges struggle to fly. But really, they're quite involved things to do. There's been a lot of discussion around, the potential, particularly in weather like this, for creating welfare problems if you house animals, particularly at high stocking densities during hot weather as well. So yes, there are maybe some small things based on what we know about what affects contact between a susceptible host and a midge. But in reality, and I feel a bit like a broken record, but we loop back to vaccination all the time, really. It is the one proven thing that you can do that will protect your flock without a lot of cost or change in management processes. Without complexity, really.
And I've heard some people say, pay attention, they need stagnant water to breed. Well, I don't know where you find any stagnant water in the UK or southern part of the UK at the moment. There's no water, never mind any stagnant water. So, but that said, indoors in old buildings, etc., there might be some water troughs that's hanging about with water. Ben?
Touching on the weather then, I'm presuming, again, presumption being a dangerous thing, but I'm presuming my animals are going to be a little bit stressed at the moment. South of England is terribly hot. It has been hot for an awful long time. There's not a lot of grass about. We're having to feed them. They're spending an awful lot of time hiding in the shade. That is presumably making this a lot worse and making animals more susceptible and likely to get more sick.
Yeah, I think it's true, Ben, and I think there's some of the clinical disease in sheep. The weather may well have contributed to it. As Guillaume said, the virus attacks the blood vessels of animals, the vasculature, and one of the things that was observed in the Netherlands, where they were seeing this huge wave of clinical cases, was that quite a lot of sheep had fluid on their lungs, pulmonary edema, and that was what was making them very sick and making them recumbent. I mean, I think it stands to reason that if you're panting anyway, if you're slightly heat exhausted anyway, and then you get damage to your lungs on top of that, it is likely, I think, that it probably has exacerbated it to a degree. But I think we need to be careful about blaming it on the weather, because clearly the virus is what's causing these deaths, is what's causing these diseases. This disease, and we don't know what type of summers are ahead of us. It could continue to be hot like this. So yeah, we need to remember the virus is the cause, but the weather may be exacerbating it.
Oh, that's such a valuable point, because we are seeing some misinformation on some very strange social media feeds, and I'm really glad you pointed that out, because I'm not suggesting for a second this is any weather related at all, except for it's probably not helping in the symptoms.
Yeah, exactly. I think the figure you quoted, Neil, about, was it over 70% of tested cases or suspect cases being positive? It's clear that we're seeing a different disease picture this year to what we have in previous seasons.
Yeah, I mean, so to put that in context then, so last year, I think we had 384 cases. Now, that could include Wales. I've not just checked right now. But let's say it includes Wales. So 384 cases in England and Wales, and that's in a 12-month period. All the report cases that are currently in the system, if they come back pro rata positive as per the rolling rate of 73%, that will be more cases in a matter of a couple of weeks than the whole of last year. I think that's how real this is, and those are farm cases. Those are not necessarily potentially, as we stand now, it's not 84 sheep or 60 sheep or 24 cattle. It's 84 holdings, of which, we are aware that, in some cases, multiple animals have been showing clinical signs, albeit only 3 have been tested, because that's, all I guess you need to confirm a positive test, and it's the free testing that's there.
And if I could take what you said there and then take what Guillaume said earlier on, we've got all those cases, but this is the beginning of the curve.
Yeah.
And that is scary.
Yeah.
Yes, and none of us are. Well, I'm not going to. I can't speak for everyone. I'm not a scientific expert, nor a weather expert. But we were always told to be scared about what would happen to the eastern side of the country. This is not cropped up on the eastern side of the country. We have got prevailing westerlies, which is the threat is that this will move inwards and upwards, and that would worry me quite a lot.
Yeah.
So I think that's been a great session, folks. Is there any other questions? Because what I'm going to propose is that we later on this week, or maybe this day next week, we do another update, because we're probably going to learn a lot in a week, and it might be prudent to just touch base again this time next week and just see, Guillaume, if you're available to feed in again and help us with our understanding. It would be good for listeners and viewers. You can view these on YouTube to know that there's an update coming. We're not just going to say this and lay this foundation and not go away and come back with some more information.
With pleasure, whenever you want. If I can help and if we can protect a little bit more our cattle and sheep, I will be there.
Saving lives. Thank you, Guillaume.
Yeah, and my closing comment would be that this is incredibly hard for some farmers that are facing this at the moment. Livestock farmers, livestock are their, that's what they're in the industry for. And, nobody likes to see livestock suffering. There are organisations out there that are able to help people. So if you are finding things a little bit challenging, we can't list them all in case we miss one. But there are organisations out there to help with the mental challenge of this. If you're struggling to find one, if you come to find us, we will find one for you. So it is important.
Can I reiterate that as well, Neil? And that's well said, but I just want to reiterate that because I've seen some social media feeds of some people who are really struggling, and you are not alone. And it feels like it sometimes, but you aren't alone. We're farming community is in this together, and we've had a lot of pressures over the last couple of years with governments and weather and markets and all sorts. And now is the time to reach out to your mate and go for a pint or call your neighbour and just check in, because you're not alone.
Yeah, great. Thanks all. Probably see you Monday. Stay safe, everyone.
Super job. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Yeah.